question.
How to improve?
It was like seven of myself,
Yeah.
and I can't see myself.
Yeah, what don't you like about working with people like yourself? And then that problem, how would you improve it?
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So, if we have the mood of wanting to represent Prabhupada, then you can look at this in terms of Krishna consciousness. What's not Krishna conscious about the behavior of anyone? And how can I make that more Krishna conscious? What could I do? Now, if after doing that you say, I can't find anything wrong with all those people, I just don't see anything wrong. That's a huge problem. Because the more we advance in spiritual life, the more we become self-aware of our faults. That's a spiritual principle. The more you progress in spiritual life, the more you become self-aware. I don't imagine any of you that will happen, but it could. But, yeah. If it does, it's not a good sign. Now, in Mayapur, in the fall, I believe, or the winter, I did a course in self-deception. The basic premise of that course is that the nature of the ego is it doesn't like seeing what's wrong with us, because we like to feel special. We like to feel intelligent and so forth. And that's okay. But when it comes to introspection, then it becomes a problem, because if you have a problem and you don't see it, then you can't deal with it. If you can't deal with it, you can't solve it. So this is it's kind of an exercise in being a little honest about where I need to improve. And just think, you might discover many things that you can improve, and that will be fantastic. And what I would suggest, that what we're doing, it's what I'm trying to do, maybe you can understand, but what I'm trying to do is see if we can adopt this kind of mentality where we're looking more about improving ourselves than what's wrong with another person, because that's where all the friction comes in organizations, when we're too focused on the problems of others and not focused enough on improving ourselves. You agree? Have you seen that? Now I want to tell you one last thing which is really interesting. In research about groups, the prime qualification they've found to be a high-functioning group member is sensitivity to the other group members' feelings. Isn't that interesting? In other words, if we were going to choose a group and we wanted to get a highly functioning group, the main criterion for us to understand which of you in the group would function well is your ability to be sympathetic and empathetic to the others. So if we did a test, who's the most empathetic, and we took the 7 most empathetic people, that would be the best team. And if we took the 7 most least empathetic people, that team would have the most difficulty. Does that make sense? I can explain this because I've seen it. I saw it for many years before I read it, and it only gelled, what I was seeing gelled with the research. I've been temple president several times, 4 times actually. And I've been in temples where I wasn't the temple president, where people were complaining about the temple president, what he was doing. And I wasn't complaining because I'd been temple president, and I could empathize with him because I knew why he was making those tough decisions that other people didn't like. So then when I read that research, I could understand That's why I wasn't upset, because I could empathize because I'd been in that position. Another thing that I noticed, that I can't say this as a fact, but generally what was happening, the people who often complained the most were the people who never managed a temple. So they actually didn't have practical experience of what it was like, and they were saying, you should do this and you shouldn't do that. And I, having run a temple, knew that's going to be difficult for him, and they don't understand it, and if they understood more, they wouldn't say that. And they would probably be okay with what he was doing if they were a little more sensitive. And you could twist it around. Let's say the temple president was very defensive. Well, wouldn't he do better to be a little sympathetic to their point of view? Try to understand them and be concerned about how they feel about him. Prabhu, I feel you should do this. I don't care how you feel. We're not interested in feelings. We're interested in following authority. And I'm the authority. So you follow me. If you don't like it, there's a door on the ground floor and you can walk right out of it. That's like ISKCON, in some places it was like that. You believe me? Yeah, it was like that, yeah. Now, what's so interesting about that is, where do you support that behavior in Bhagavad Gita? Which verse supports that behavior? The verse is in the 19th chapter, not the first 18. Yes or yes? That's the problem. You put everything together and you come up with something like that because it may be because you're insensitive. So that started to make sense to me when I went through the history of working in various temples where people were not sensitive to one another. They had dysfunctional teams. They didn't do well. And I was on such a team that was somewhat dysfunctional. Actually, there's mostly one person who was dysfunctional. Everybody else was aligned, and one person wasn't. Unfortunately, he was the temple president. But over time, he became aligned, and that team gelled, and we became a powerful team. We had an amazing temple, powerful team, because we all understood one another. And so the temple president, if you'd give him an idea that was new, his natural response was to reject it. He couldn't digest it long enough to think about it. His response was, it's new is wrong, new is bad. He'd reject it. So we started to understand that. So we would just say, okay, all right, we won't do that. And the next day he would call up. After every meeting, he would call up and say, I thought about your idea, it's a good idea. I think we should do it. So we just knew that was going to happen. So knowing one another, being sensitive to the needs, he needs to reject it. He needs to do that first because he's trying to protect the dharma of the temple. So he needed to do that because new ideas to him were like anti-Prabhupada, and he needed to digest. So we understood that. And then gradually he got better because after practically accepting every idea that we gave him, he stopped his spontaneous rejection because he started to realize we have good ideas, we're not so bad. So he became more sensitive to us. And we had this amazing team. So something to consider, right? Now, I have another experience. This is real world stuff. So I'm just telling it like it is. Some people are reformers. That's their personality type. You know those people? Have you met them? Mm-hmm. That's just their nature. It's not like they're trying to be unpleasant. It's just that they have to reform. When something's wrong, they have to reform it. They can't help themselves. That's what they do. That's their nature. That's their personality. Some people, justice, if they see something unjust, they have to correct it. They cannot tolerate it. Right? Anyone in the room like that? You see something unjust and it's like, get the atom bombs and bomb this. Right? Now, I've dealt with people like that. And as I said, Prabhupada wanted us to cooperate. And the justice people have, in my experience, generally, I can't say in every case, but the justice people generally have the most difficult time cooperating, because if they don't agree with it, they feel it's a compromise of their principles to go along with it. So that they can't compromise, because why should I go along with this? It's wrong. Have you seen that before or done that before? I understand that completely. It's why should I go against my integrity? Because I don't believe with the group decision, so I shouldn't agree with it. The problem is, Prabhupada wants us to agree and to work together. So if your criterion to work together is that you agree with it, it's going to be extremely difficult for you to work, because I don't agree with it. I can't do it. I'm compromising my own integrity, and this is not dharmic. This is not right. So if you have that nature, that's something to consider. And if you want to cooperate with a group, that's going to be your personal challenge. And you're going to have to remember this principle that people who are sensitive make the best team members. And people who are justice-oriented, in my experience, are not the most sensitive people. In fact, oftentimes, they don't actually care how they make people feel. All they care about is justice. Justice is what's important, not how you feel, not working together, not compromising. Have you seen that before? So all of you justice people, you consider these things in light of the fact that Prabhupada wants us to work together, and these are your challenges. So if you're working with a group of people like yourself, that's going to be a tough group, I would think. You agree? That would be a hard one. Yeah. I'm not doing it, I don't agree with it. It's wrong, that's it. So, perhaps for those of you who feel justice or dharma is really important, meditate on the dharma that Prabhupada wants you to cooperate as the highest principle. Higher than your own concept of dharma is the principle to work together with the other devotees. That's the highest dharma. I mean, Prabhupada said if we don't work together, if we fight, if we segregate, then his work would be stopped. So it's a high principle. In fact, and the dharmic people, the dharma justice people, have a hard time dealing with this, but some devotees have said the most essential instruction Prabhupada ever gave was cooperate. Like the highest instruction. How could that be? Cooperate, even if what we decide I don't agree with, I don't think it's Siddhanta, cooperate as a higher principle. That's something to meditate on. Now, why did Prabhupada say that? Interesting. You probably all know that the Gaudiya Math divided over who would be the leader. And they couldn't, and Bhaktisiddhanta didn't want them to appoint a leader, but they did. And in fact, they appointed two leaders. And there was a division. People sided with one leader's side and the other leader's side. And so it divided. And that became so messy, and it went to court, that many members of either side became disgusted, and they went off and started their own temples, and that divided it further. So you have original Gaudiya Math temples, and you have subsequent temples. So Prabhupada lived through that. So when he was asking us to cooperate, sometimes he would say, don't create another Gaudiya Math. And he was concerned because he said once they divided, as is obvious, they lost their power because they fragmented. So he didn't want that to happen to ISKCON. So this cooperate mantra, it's high up there because that in Prabhupada's mind, it would prevent us from fragmenting, and if we fragmented, we would lose our potency. So he wanted us to keep together. So therefore, I will quote Vaisheshika Prabhu, who was just here, who said, the greatest austerity that we perform in ISKCON is to cooperate. to get along with other devotees is our greatest austerity. You agree? Or in other words, it's the hardest thing to do. And it's so easy not to, because I can't, I don't want to do it. That's easy. Anybody can do that. But to actually do it is hard. I could do something, no, we don't want you to do it, I have to go along with that. That's difficult. They choose you to do something when I'm better than you. That's difficult. Isn't it? Okay. Are we ready to do the exercise?
Yes.
Okay. So all of you watching, if you want to do the exercise and you don't have anybody with you, then what you can do is you can do the exercise yourself. You just imagine you're a team leader and everyone on the team is you. And whatever idiosyncrasies or nature that you feel would be difficult to work with, you point those out, and then you can do this just on paper, and then you can write down ways in which you can improve. And if you want to, you could also try to understand, which may be important and useful, why you're like that. Because why you're like that may not be your nature. It may just be an experience you had. Well, I'm like this because people dealt with me this way, so that's how I deal with people. There may be a reason why you're like that, which would be easy to correct if you understood why. Why am I like that? And if you don't come up with a solution today, it's okay. You can keep thinking about it. At least you've come up with step one, which is awareness, that this is something I should work on if I'm going to be able to work well within an organization. Now, before we begin, I would like to say, if I were in control of the universe, I would give this course to everyone who joined ISKCON. Because I feel everyone who joins ISKCON needs to take a course on how to get along with others, because you're thrown into an organization. You're thrown into a situation where many of you have not yet experienced, and it's a challenge to learn how to get along well and stay together. And I travel 15, 20 temples a year, and that's my experience. Getting along is an extreme challenge. And it requires work. We really have to work on it. It doesn't always just happen. Some places it happens, but it always doesn't just happen. So it needs work, and I think it would be fantastic if everyone who became part of ISKCON did this kind of work, because I think this would help our movement. So that's why we're doing it. Are we ready?
Yes.
Yes.
Are we enthusiastic?
Yes.
Are we ready to run out of the room?
Yes.
I hope not. Okay. So, one of the rules of this exercise and all the exercises we do is whatever your partner tells you, don't tell anybody else. It's confidential. And if they want to share with other devotees, they're free to share. But don't share what they reveal to you, because they may reveal some things about themselves which are private and personal, and they don't want anyone else to know. So when you're listening, that's it. You're just going to listen as a service. If they want your advice, they'll ask. If they don't say anything. Just listen and be silent about it. Very important. Now, when you want to improve yourself, if you have someone to talk about it, it's very helpful. So as long as you know that your partner isn't going to tell anybody, they'll feel more free to talk about their issue. You agree? But if they fear you're going to tell somebody, they may not want to tell you everything. And some things we need to talk about, because if there's something that we need to improve, it's extremely therapeutic to talk about it, right? So I just have to define to you what confidence means, because we're creating confidence here. What confidence means in this environment is when we agree to not tell anybody, it doesn't mean, not telling anybody doesn't mean it's okay to tell your best friend. It's okay to tell your husband or wife, mother, father. Not telling anybody means nobody. And most of us think not telling anybody means anybody in general, but my best friend's okay, or my wife or husband's okay. It's true. I didn't do a PhD in this topic, but I've seen it enough that that's how we think. Confidential means, Prabhu, I'm not supposed to tell you this. How many people have ever told you, I'm not supposed to tell you this, but... Yeah, that's confidential. That means that person is close to you. To which you should say, Prabhu, if you're not supposed to tell me, don't. Because you promised not to tell anybody, so don't break your confidence. So that's what we want to learn. So that will enable you to feel free to talk. And partner, when you listen, the key to listening is don't judge and don't make faces that look like you're judging the person. Because if let's say I told you, well, you know, this is what I wouldn't like about working with me. I would like to strangle everybody. I hate, if people don't agree with me, I just feel like picking them up and throwing them out the window. And you're listening to that and you're going, oh my God, this person is horrible. And you're showing that in your posture and your face. But actually the person needs to talk about it. He needs to, he's being thoroughly honest. Does he actually feel like throwing them out the window? Maybe, but not really. But he's trying to express himself and talk about it and talk through it. And if you're showing expressions of anything other than sympathetic listening, he's not going to be able to talk. So your service is to be able to listen, because listening facilitates speaking. And so you're going to listen without judgment, without making, oh my God faces, I can't believe you would do that faces, are you kidding me? Or interrupting, that's offensive, Prabhu. How can you think like that? And so we want to create an environment in which we're allowing one another to talk without judgment, because it's very important. And you will find if you can talk about something in relation to yourself that you need to improve in this kind of environment, it'll be amazingly helpful. So can we do that? So very important. Okay. Can anybody not do that? Because if you can't do that, we'll just pick you up and throw you out the window. That will... No, we won't. We're devotees. We don't do those things. Okay, so all of you out there do the exercise, and you're going to watch everyone else doing the exercise. So Prabhus, do it well. 10 million people are watching you right now.
Wow, how does it work? I mean, we have a certain time limit.
Just do as long as you need.
And then we just flip over.
Yeah, by midnight I'll tell you you've gone too long. Yeah.